All that remains to cover regarding the reverberation ensemble is the analogues of the Atziluth layer. These are some of the more powerful ones. First we have Elena, the Blood-Red Knight. Now, she was different before she distorted. She was a blood fiend, which is basically a vampire, treated with fear. She fought them in a mansion, so it was possible that she was a fixer in the past. She was afraid of becoming their next target, terrified of those that became them, even though they could pass for human. But after becoming a blood fiend, she no longer considered what she did to be abnormal, considering that she rejected her old ideals, which, as far as she was concerned, opened up her potential for growth, not seeing any justification for the condemnation of humans of her kind. Yeah. After she became a blood fiend and she distorted into a form that was a gender-bent mix of the Nosferatu abnormality mixed with Two-Face. She killed thousands before Roland and Angelica hunted her down and supposedly killed her, which was, as it was revealed, to be a temporary setback. She had some fun warping the flesh of the economy-class passengers of the warp train, with Jaehyun's help. Then she slaughtered Section 1 of the southern branch of the Hana Association, with the help of the others. Then assisted in confronting Yuri, the Purple Tear. Okay, that was before the Hana Association slaughter. And in the end, she and the others broke into the library. And she did her part on the floor that she was assigned to take care of. Bainar greets the unfamiliar child as she arrived at the floor of philosophy. Elena told her to skip the intro as she's heard enough about her kind and what they do there. She believed that if the power to manifest the physical space was said to be a singularity, specifically the floor of philosophy, a space full of stars, like the one shining over the city. Bainar wanted to know what she thought of them. Bainar considered them to be a compass in the sky that gave guidance to people, or representations of the city itself. Yeah, that is how Bainar sees them. Are the stars shining over the city, or is the city reflected in them? Elena saw stars as dots in the sky that gave a forbidding impression, like they're looking down upon them from the highest post. Bainar has a more complex way of seeing that. Elena is more simple and to the point. Elena saw them as alluring from afar, but once they're close up, they're disappointing. She didn't rise to be a star of the city because she wanted to. Yeah, she rose because she killed Nest residents as well as those in the back streets. Bainar sees that most beings that become stars of the city did so simply by following their wants, much like Elena did. Elena agreed with this, although hers involved draining blood, which brought fear to her from humans, which she considered unreasonable. Well, it's because, Elena, you were killing them indiscriminately. If you slaughtered syndicate thugs and similar scumbags, no one legitimate would complain. She sees the name of her kind and the name they gave her as how humans perceive them, even though they're largely the same. Well, minus the thirst for blood, of course. Also, they're past that. Bina asked how she felt when she craved human blood, if she still considered herself human. Elena didn't give a She kills and gets it over with, all to slake her thirst that grows stronger. Perhaps it's an infection. One that makes this thirst grow stronger until it eventually kills her or burns her out. And that is if someone didn't kill her first before that happened. But it wasn't always like that, as it was just for herself to begin with, but later on she wanted to know, was she a bloodthirsty beast or a pathetic runaway escaping from reality, or a human who had gone insane from fiendish circumstances and twisted desires? I'm still thinking it's more likely you have an infection that changed you and replaced your need for food and drink for a desire for blood. Well, whatever the case, it clearly ate away at her psyche. She tried to convince herself that she was an ordinary human living an ordinary life, eventually reaching the conclusion that it's beyond her reach. Her sanity was more intact then, even as she was draining humans dry, questioning the morality of what she was doing. She finds that funny now. Bina asked if she found it amusing that she once sought an answer to a question that she lacked the answers for. Elena didn't think that her kind would view blood fiends any differently, even if she continued to think about it. Yeah, no sudden shift in her views on them. Elena, Bina used to be Garian, arbiter of the head. She had fun sadistically torturing people that she was ordered to destroy. If you knew that, you'd probably be surprised by how much she changed. Elena then went on to say that if humans want to live their lives their way, she'd do the same. Blood fiends were forced to live in the darkness, not able to roam the streets in peace. What sins had they committed to deserve that treatment? Okay, how about indiscriminately killing people to feast on their blood? She asked, why must they suffer to ensure that humans lived a painless life? Well, if you define painless as not being treated like a smoothie to one with a fruit addiction, then you're inviting the suffering coming your way. There's also a part where it was stated that they're humans like them. They're just looking different. So there are some minor differences in appearance, but they are capable of passing for human. I can see why she says that she feels persecuted, as not even those who have undergone full body replacements, as in those replaced with a cybernetic body, with only their brains being retained. even they're not treated that badly, and they're considered defiled by some. Basically, humans pursue their desires, and blood fiends are left in the dark. So it's only natural for her to feel indignant based on that. Humans won't change their views regardless of what the blood fiends do, so they shouldn't hold back either. Bina found this to be intriguing. Elena was not impressed by this. She asked her if thoughts on her kind were relevant to her. Bina said that they were, as it was time to fight. Elena represents Cheruf, or intolerance, as she felt that she was being persecuted by the human inhabitants of the city. Although considering that she was murderously violent to sate her first, it sounds more like it was due to her being a threat, rather than what she was. She was the antithesis of Bina, both in the past, had a good amount of infamy. In Bina's case, it was because she was the sadistic Garian, arbiter of the head, one that few encountered, and lived to speak of it. On the other hand, we have Elena, the Blood-Red Knight, a vampiric serial killer and mass murderer. While Garian was doing what she did due to a mix of following orders from the head and her own amusement, which was a byproduct of this, Elena was doing this to sustain herself as a blood fiend. Both were killed by a colour fixer. Garian by Kali, although she died as well. Elena by Roland, although it has to be said that he had help at the time. Also, he wasn't a colour fixer at that time. Also, well, Garian came back due to Aeon. Elena came back like Dracula, as in by her own means. After Elena joined the Reverberation Ensemble, she continued doing what she was doing and wasn't subtle about it. In fact, Jaeyeon had to caution her about that, while Bina wasn't afraid to speak insightful things to others and has reformed somewhat. It turned out that the Vermilion Cross failed their assignment, as they were there to assist Elena in fighting Bina and her librarians. As an empty husk, armed with a burning cross, which the remains of this colour fixer wielded quite proficiently, and Elena was capable of draining the health of others. Yeah, she's vampiric. What do you expect? One regenerates or heals, depending on how you see it, and one burns. Bina used the power of the fairies and other attacks. With the assistance of the other librarians, to prevent Elena from making the undead husk of the Vermilion Cross stronger. Both were taken down. Next we have Pluto, yesterday's promise. He used to be a fixer, but not one that works in a contract office, or notary office, or whatever you want to call it, which would have avoided what happened next, as his story started when he was screwed over by Roland, the Black Silence, due to him not reading the fine print in his contracts. The parts that involved enkephalin smuggling to Okor. Well, the enkephalin was meant for Okor, and it was smuggled out. It's possible that he might have screwed over Roland as he threatened to do some nasty things to him. Well, that's oversimplifying it. Although it is possible that he might have pulled some strings to prevent him from moving to a nest. Or it could just be some coincidence that those that offered nest migration during the Smoke War never intended to fulfill their side of the bargain. Sometime after that, he distorted into a distortion that was a mix of Mephisto from the Marvel Universe and the Jinn from the Wishmaster series, as he made contracts that hid unfavourable terms in the fine print. He certainly did business in the back streets of District 22, the Kane office, and many others. He even assisted Arcadia after joining his Reverberation Ensemble, distorting Eileen, Bremen, and Philip. He even assisted in stopping the Clockwork Thief in the derelict's outskirts lab. And after the Purple Tear was backed against the wall due to his powers preventing her escape, then again she did escape with the invitation, so that didn't really help much. He had Roland in front of him, but he played his part, regardless of what he wanted to do, the part that Arcadia had for him. Upon Pluto arriving on the floor of religion, Hockmer greeted him and introduced himself, telling him that he's the librarian that guards that floor. Pluto remarks on how polite he is compared to how brutal the library is based on its reputation. It's no more or less brutal than the rest of the city, Pluto. Although the city doesn't have the library's quiet and moody atmosphere, where its silence and emptiness makes it hard for him to believe that the macabre atrocity of turning people into books takes place there. What about your atrocities? Like the Thousand Needles incident in District 22? Then he asked about the people behind Hockmer. He replied that they were his assistant librarians aiding him. He told them to introduce themselves. Pluto introduced himself. He noted that the floor that he was on was dedicated to religion, asking Hockmer what his view on that was. Pluto saw it as, well, let's get to that. Hockmer saw it as one who, well, it's what one firmly believes in, a state of mind that gives motivation and significance to their deeds. Pluto asks if the power of belief was limited to having such a mindset, that deeds didn't inherently determine the morality of an individual, believing that even if bad deeds were performed, they can be a virtuous person and can be forgiven for anything. He argues that belief and religion are what enables one to think that everything they conceive and accept is right, where faith has to be a selfish and cruel concept, based on that. Yeah, the Church of Gears is certainly an example of that. Religion has been known to be used as an excuse for violence and other acts which were questionable at best. Some things can't be easily forgiven. Errors of knowledge are more easily forgiven than acts of conscious evil. Hockmer doesn't see a lot that he can argue about that. Pluto asked if he agreed with what he said. Hockmer sees that it's true that an unsteady and crumbled mind was prone to absorb improper beliefs. This made Pluto feel unsettled. Hockmer asked if he has anyone or anything that he believes in. Pluto doesn't want to put faith into what he can't see, as he questioned the reality in front of him, even questioning if he's looking at Hockmer or even if he's there. An extreme variation of looks can be deceiving, as he questions what doesn't exist, never mind worship. Sensing coldness in a hot object, or hotness from a cold object, is what he compares this with. Also asking what if this entity was deceitful and hid the perception of the world with lies. Hockmer sees that if one perceives it in a certain way, regardless of reality, it would be an undeniable truth, even if it was false. The one who believed it remains stalwart. To believe in something, one must believe in themselves and their view on it. Pluto basically said, "You're talking, Mon," in a more polite way. He referred to that day when Roland cheated him with how the contract was written. That day where he learned that he couldn't blindly trust what he saw. He was made a fool. That contract cost him everything. Arcadia saved him from being consumed by resentment and possibly destroying himself. Hockmer couldn't answer. Pluto added that he planned to take the path that Arcadia intends to open. He believes in Arcadia and the new world that he intends to create. Hockmer asks why he puts faith in him. Pluto answered that if he could close his eyes and open them again in a new world forever devoid of lies, he'd readily believe in him. Are you sure that it wouldn't replace one lie with another? Pluto hopes that Hockmer would appreciate the city when it becomes that place. So in other words, it would become a living hell. Hockmer didn't say what he thought of that, as his opinions didn't really matter to Pluto. Pluto then told him to be prepared. A battle commenced. Pluto represents Ilweleth, or ignorance. This is because he was both the victim and victimizer at different points in time. His power revolves around deceiving his victims with a contract that screws them over in the end. After that, as in how he was screwed over by Roland, he can tell fantasy from reality, needing Arcadia to give him a world without deceit. Well, that depends on what a madman's definition of that is. Hockmer is his antithesis, as while both have good social skills, are loyal to those that they see as worthy of that, Arcadia in Pluto's case and Aeon in Hockmer's case. They also provide insights. They're also quite different in other ways, due to their differing experiences. Hockmer as Benjamin wanted to make Angela feel cared about, but his warnings after everyone else left were ignored and he was killed on Aeon's orders by Angela. Nice reward. though he still remains loyal, even considering the actions he did as Hokma. He got over that with Aeon's help and moved forward. Pluto, on the other hand, had the experience of being an extortion victim of Roland, and was given purpose by Arcadia, where he became his second in command, and had a variety of powers such as teleportation superior to W Corp, the ability to stop the clockwork teeth, barrier generation, and reality warping contracts. Both regardless are key members of their organizations. Pluto to the Reverberation Ensemble, Hokma to Elcor, even as Benjamin. Some habits die hard, I suppose. He saw the world as an aggregation of delusions, where reality is what others see it as, where deception is an ever-present risk, where it's not possible for any that are untainted by knowledge to see the world as others observe it. It's a place devoid of wants, although he used that term loosely. He sees that the more one learns, the more delusions are invited. But if the same place is where the same sentiments are felt, it might not be a delusion. Believing that the sky and even a holy entity can be a projection of your own self. He didn't want to believe what was right in front of him. Yeah, this was likely his perspective after he distorted, but before Arcadia found him. As for what Hokma and his assistant librarians had to deal with, they had a problem. They each had contracts forced upon them. Each had a benefit, but with a cost. The contract of light restored all light for the one that has this. But if there was any light remaining after they've made their moves, it would cost some of their health. The contract of might gives strength, but at the cost of staggering if there are attacks used that have more than one element that aren't counter moves. The contract of amplification, that's where if an attack requires a specific amount of light, it increases in power. If it doesn't, it becomes weaker. The contract of liberty, this randomizes the cost of attacks, where it harms the wielder if the same cost is a specific value. The contract of swiftness makes the user of it faster, but the attack will be weaker if it's one-sided. So the religion team had better set themselves up to take that into account and give each other contracts that reflect their particular strengths. As for Pluto, he attacks with shades, which can copy what a specific librarian has, and when all of the shades are dead, Pluto can be damaged from things like burn and bleed. So, Lu Association or, well, perhaps She Association or anything else that focuses on bleed. He can trap a librarian in a prison and create a stronger shade version of them, but they can be freed with enough punishment to the prison. He can also attack everyone with a mass attack, but each time he fails to deliver damage with this, he'll be more likely to be staggered. This was a tough battle, but the religion team had a wise master in Hokma. Finally, we have Arcadia, the Blue Reverberation, the Blue Sicko, the Mercury Poison Regency Dandy, Racial Joker. Whatever you want to call him. He's the leader of the Reverberation Ensemble. His story started when he and Angelica were captured by a wing and subjected to some rather traumatic experiments. He apparently got the worst of it as he was taken to a room that Angelica was not taken to, at least not as much. This likely drove him partially insane. He and his sister were eventually dumped in the outskirts, but they both found a way back and became fixers. He eventually became the Blue Reverberation. Angelica married Roland, the Black Silence, whom he didn't approve of. And after his sister was killed by the pianist, this caused his sanity to snap completely. Then he heard the voice of Miss Sun, and with her guidance, along with Iori the Purple Tear, started recruiting others. By the time he got to Eileen, Pluto, Jaehyun, Elena, Bremen, Tanya, well, the first one of those was saved from an assassination attempt. Pluto was recruited before her. After that, Oswald, Greta and Philip were recruited. He also encouraged specific groups to go into the library, getting Thelma of the She Association to send Section 2 into it, being one example. After that, he fed the manager of the southern branch of the She Association to the Smiling Faces Syndicate. When he outlasted his usefulness, he also coerced the Kane office to go in there, with Pluto's help. He also attacked Zhao, the Maiden of Iron, and Lu Association South Section 1, in order to retrieve Philip. Even Yuri, the Purple Tear, his mentor, one who helped him for his own, helped him for her own reasons, rather. Even she was discarded when she no longer was needed, although she got away before she was presumably killed slowly and painfully. Then he and the others went to the library to set up a performance that would spread the distortion to everyone within the city. Arcadia, upon arriving at the floor of General Works, finds a silent Roland. Arcadia asked if he was going to keep his mouth shut before him. Well, that might have something to do with you ordering his wife and your sister to be turned into a puppet. Roland asked, what did he want to hear? They know each other's goals. Arcadia asked if he was still being oversensitive because they hurt Angela's feelings, then stated that he was just angry that they revealed his oh-so-perfect plan, likely involving Angela. Well, he's not wrong, but Roland sees you as a higher priority threat. Speaking of which, Roland found that rich coming from what he was doing and what he was planning to do. Arcadia asked him what he meant by that. Something wrongful. Morality was a concept that he couldn't comprehend. He saw right things as ingrained into humans in the name of common sense, which hinders their progress and makes their lives unhappy. No, Arcadia, morality is chosen, it's not automatic. Well, regardless, Roland was annoyed by this horse. Arcadia then spoke of definitions, such as time flowing in one direction. Well, at least for those that lack T-Corp singularity. He believes that's because they believe that time has to flow one way. What makes something right? Why do we have to bother deciding what's right? Well, it's because it's not always easy to define, and just believing something is right can end up making it wrong. Arcadia believes that's because an entity drew those lines, so they can't progress any farther, believing that rightness was restraining human desires, impeding advancement. Sometimes restraint is necessary, Arcadia. It can stop certain concepts from being taken too far. In fact, that's why the city is such an awful hole that it is now. Also, it's not an entity that's watching from above that's holding people back. It's the head. They want the people of the city to suffer. Arcadia believed that he found the answer and was going to announce this to the city. Roland then said that, well, in a disbelieving and bemused tone, Arcadia believed that it was possible to go back in time. If the mold was broken, telling him that he's wasting his time on useless ideas. Arcadia believed that it was possible. Roland just can't get out of the molds that he's firmly holding on to, doubting the possibility. Without the molds, they can reach infinite heights. He saw it as proven. It's why the reverberation ensemble was there. Roland believes that Arcadia just wants to get rid of the pain that he's carrying, asking if he's wrong. That he just wants to crush Roland, the city, and most of all Angela for taking Angelica's life. Arcadia claims that's not the case, asking if he's like him, where he sees through one thing but no farther than that. Arcadia claims to not want to return his suffering in full, although he did consider that, as Angelica was taken from him twice. He briefly felt despair, obsession, rage, and sorrow when he was near that piano. But those feelings dissipated quickly. He felt better afterwards. He questioned if her death was truly a tragedy. He chose not to care about his feelings, much as he saw Roland as blinded by wrath. Roland didn't believe him, as he's clinging to the justification that it's for Angelica's sake even now. Apparently, Arcadia wanted to send her off with this performance, not going on a rampage like he did. He sees Angelica justifying the pursuit of an ambition, tainted by unclear desires even now. Well, at least now, Roland is honest about his desires, and has the one he he was looking for right in his sights, although dealing with her would have to wait until he's done with you, Arcadia. Roland asks why he hasn't dropped his excuse of it being his dirge, if he's realized that. Arcadia said that it was why he was preparing that performance, the final enlightenment that he'll share with everyone, and the last thing he does for Angelica. Roland sees Arcadia's levels as off the charts. Arcadia sees this as making life fun. He'll not stop after this performance, becoming more powerful. That includes taking the power he's keeping in storage with his own two hands. Oh, so he wants to take Roland's gloves, partly because they have a power supply that allows for weapons to be switched. And some of them were Angelica's. Well, at least two, anyway. Or is it because Roland is simply in the way of the light? Arcadia took Roland's silent hint as him telling him to just get on with it. He laughed, but he's still keeping his gloves. Roland told him to shut up as the battle commenced. Arcadia represents Faumiel, or duality, as he's a living contradiction, or more specifically his reasons for creating this world's version of the Legion of Doom. The Reverberation Ensemble was made due to his despair over losing Angelica. Unfortunately, his moral compass is around the polar regions, meaning that the needle spins around. As in, it's as is any sane person that is unfortunate to be near him, if he decides to kill them. He gives the perception of reality the finger, wanting to free the world of loneliness. Or roughly translated, he wants to turn everyone into distortions. He blames Roland for failing to save Angelica from the pianist. Well, I doubted that he would have cared if he knew that it was because of Olivia that he was away from District 9. Yet, he has no problems with ordering Jaehyun and Elena to defile her corpse and turning her into a puppet. As for the difference between Arcadia and Ian, this time it's Ian that is Arcadia's antithesis, rather than Roland. They both suffered from personal loss. Ian with Carmen, and Arcadia with Angelica, but how it affected them differed. With Ian, he wanted to finish what Carmen started, to complete the seed of light and activate it, to restore humanity to the state it was long before the rise of the head. Even considering that it involved cruel actions that would make even the average thumb soldato say, "Me, I wouldn't go that far unless a superior specifically ordered me to do so." He made his friends, his best employees, along with 2 children and an arbiter of the head, into separats, brains and robot bodies. He also made Angela in Carmen's image, who took after him more. This same AI also sabotaged the seed of light just before it was completely released. Okay, it was halfway there, but you get the idea. Arcadia, on the other hand, brought together distortions to form the Reverberation Ensemble, and it's clear that he doesn't give a about the methods, or more specifically the ethics. Something that your average fixer doesn't give a about. When they're sane. He intended to create an equal and opposite to the patron librarians. The patron librarians being the Sephiroth of the Tree of Life. His reverberation ensemble was the Quipoff of the Tree of Death. He was guided by Miss Sun to seek the light that's in the library. Whoever or whatever Miss Sun is, it matched Adam's goal, as in the insane iteration of Aeon. It appears that there's some manipulation by those that they respected. Carmen did so to get Aeon to agree to her ideas, which stopped him from being too excessive when she was alive, while Miss Sun and Yuri, the Purple Tear, was this with Arcadia. This certainly didn't bring out the best in him, although there was apparently not that much when it comes to the best in him to begin with. Apparently, when he found out about the pianist, he rushed to District 9. He only found the pianist with the piano's lid shut on his torso. The emotions were hard to define. He didn't shed tears, but he was in pain. He couldn't find her body, but he felt her presence, so he didn't care about the now empty shell. He then decided to create a new world, where people could live bountiful lives regardless of what they have, free from obsession or greed, to not fixate on physical appearance or fear of death, or the possibility of eternal rest. As for the battle itself, this was a solo battle between Arcadia, the blue sicko, and Roland, the black stain. Arcadia, armed with his resonance-determined scythe, and Roland with a mix of different weapons. At least two of them used to belong to Angelica. In this case, it's a matter of who dies first. But having Yuna's passive certainly helps against this effete-looking madman, although Roland was able to save his best attack for last, to counter Arcadia's best, and took him down. After taking care of Arcadia, he met up with Angela, relieved that they put a stop to the blue sicko and his gang of nutcases. Their books were on another level in terms of power. The invitation could take them no farther. This is where they ended up, their final destination. He congratulated her. It was finally over. Her human form was complete, so she didn't have to live as a machine. All the light was reclaimed. She was free. She had him to thank for her becoming human and being able to leave the library. She just needs to take the book from the lights. The one book. However, Roland intended to finish what he was there for as well. He asked if she could guess what he was about to do. Angela, I think it's time to go to condition brown. And now that you're human, that has an altogether different meaning. Yes, we know where this is going, don't we? But that will have to wait until the next video, where this will continue. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!